Right now, he is introducing everyone that has now joined him. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Loudly about the unacceptable anti-Semitism that we are seeing in our city, in Brooklyn, and across the country. There has been, as you all know, a disturbing number of attacks, a rise in attacks against Jewish New Yorkers. And the numbers are alarming, and the stories are horrifying. No one should feel unsafe in our city because of their faith. I want to applaud the NYPD, which is why I am so grateful that Captain Hollywood is here for making an arrest last week in one of the most recent attacks that we saw. An Orthodox man was punched in his head, and his hat and yarmulke fell off right here in Williamsburg. But even with that arrest, people are still frightened. People are frightened all across the city. And as an elected official, it hurts to say that. I want everyone in our great city, the greatest city in the world, to feel safe and to feel protected. And the city council is working hard with all of these amazing leaders to ensure that that happens. But as we know, sadly, hate is very, very powerful. More than 7 decades after the last concentration camp was forcibly closed, the vile evil of anti-Semitism is still present in our city and throughout the entire world. From California to Cleveland to Kansas, all the way to Paris and to Mumbai, Jewish people are still being deliberately targeted by those who have nothing but hate and evil in their hearts because of their faith or because of their appearance. I was horrified when I saw the video recently of that man being brutally assaulted in Williamsburg. He was hit from behind, he was disoriented, the outcry was immediate, but the crime was not new. And just days before, another Jewish man was hit in the face in our great neighborhood of Williamsburg. In Crown Heights, a Jewish man was called an anti-Semitic slur, and he was spat at in his face. And just this past weekend, just a couple of days ago, we heard of 2 teenage boys, 2 Hasidic boys, who were harassed and frightened in Borough Park by a man or men trailing them, yelling, "We love Hitler." Imagine how terrifying it is for those 2 young boys. And they might not be the only victims from these lunatics, from this obscene, hateful harassment. The NYPD is currently investigating whether another man was a victim of these perpetrators who we know did this to these 2 young boys. And if this rash of incidents this month doesn't alarm New Yorkers, we should look at the overall numbers. The NYPD has reported an 82% rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes in the first 4 months of 2019. 82%. 82% in the first 4 months. This is unspeakable. And it's not just New York. Anti-Semitic attacks across our country are rising. In 2018, anti-Semitic assaults doubled, according to the Anti-Defamation League. But New York City stands out. New York is one of the states with the highest number of anti-Semitic incidents in the entire country. New York counted 340 hate crimes against Jewish people in 2018, second only to the state of California, and California is much bigger than New York. That is not a number that we will accept. We do not accept these numbers. Our city is in a crisis. So what do? Do we watch the numbers grow? No. Do we hope that the hate goes away? That is not likely anytime soon. We must proactively work to stop this crisis. This January, the City Council passed legislation to create the Office of Hate Crime Prevention to make sure that this issue is dealt with properly. This new office will do outreach and training in communities and educate people about the impact and effect of hate crimes. It will coordinate with relevant agencies, with interfaith organizations, many of the groups that are represented here today, and community groups to implement real and effective outreach on this subject. Now we are fighting to ensure that Mayor de Blasio fully funds this office in this upcoming budget. And we will continue to speak out about the unacceptable number of anti-Semitic attacks. Hate has no place in our city. And I also want to be clear that in the midst of having this conversation today, it has been totally and completely unacceptable that people have tried to use a public health crisis about measles against the Jewish community here in Brooklyn and in New York City. This is not a Jewish issue. This is an issue of some really irresponsible people who are spreading anti-vaxxing propaganda and have infiltrated certain communities, not just this community, but other communities as well. And it's important that we call for what it is, because it has been a way to try to smear a community in a certain way in the midst of what we've been experiencing with hate crimes across New York City, and we have to call it what it is. We are the greatest city in the world. And part of the reason why we are the greatest city in the world is because of our diversity. 38% of New Yorkers were not born in the United States of America. They came here with dreams and aspirations for themselves and for their families. And many, many Jewish people, the same thing. They came to the greatest city in the world with dreams and aspirations for themselves and for their families and for their community. We have to ensure that everyone is safe, everyone gets the protection that they deserve, and that we show that this is intolerable in New York City. These anti-Semitic attacks must stop, and we will work together to ensure that that happens. I want to thank you all for being here today, for us doing this collectively. I see my friend Josh Melman, who's here to shed light on this deeply disturbing problem. The first person that I want to call up is my friend, a council member and the chair of the Jewish caucus in the New York City Council, Councilmember Chaim Deutsch.
Thank you very much. And firstly, I want to thank the Speaker for his leadership on these issues, not only anti-Semitic issues, but overall hate crimes throughout the city. And as you know, in 2019, overall hate crimes are on the rise. We have experienced at least more than one every day. And anti-Semitic hate crimes, we have had almost every day thus far this year compared to 2018 at this time, in 2018. It's time that we call upon the administration. There was a bill in the City Council sponsored by my colleagues, Councilmember Donovan Richards and Councilmember Mark Levine, putting in a hate crimes office, as well as educators to go out throughout our city and educating the people of the impacts of hate crimes throughout the city. We're calling on the administration to implement this new office. The time is now, not tomorrow. With these assaults that are happening throughout the city, it's extremely, extremely disturbing. And the fact is, when you look at the Hate Crimes Task Force, where they have over 35 investigators, they only investigate hate crimes after the fact. We need to be proactive rather than reactive and make sure that we go out and educate the public. And we also need to know the underlying reasons of these hate crimes. Is it a hate crime from an individual who has hate in his or her blood? Is it someone that is uneducated and needs to learn more? So it's extremely important to have the New York City Police Department, as well as a district attorney, to report to the New York City Council of the underlying reasons of why an individual commits these hate crimes. So this way, as the City Council, we're better able to legislate and to put in the resources for these issues that are happening across the city. I think it's time that enough is enough. We need to take action. As you see here, we're standing united from people representing different communities throughout our city. We're fortunate to have a speaker who is really continue to bring these issues to light. This is so important. It's not only about standing at a press conference, but it's about implementing programs and initiatives throughout the city to prevent these incidents from happening. So we're going to keep on standing united. We're going to keep on speaking out against hate, bias, bigotry. And again, I'd like to say that it's extremely disturbing of what is happening here in the Jewish community by all these anti-Semitic hate crimes and assaults that are happening to individuals throughout our city. So enough is enough. And once again, I want to thank my speaker, Corey Johnson, for standing up and for raising his voice and bringing all our members into one united voice. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Chaim. We're joined by Councilmember Andy Cohen from the Bronx, so I really want to appreciate him coming all the way down from Riverdale to be here today. We're joined by Councilmember Brad Lander, Councilmember Mark Levine, and I mentioned Councilmember Matthew Eugene. Before I call up the other council members, I want to call up Rabbi David Niederman to give some remarks. I'm really grateful for him hosting us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for coming down and bringing together this wonderful group of legislators and community leaders to combat and stop this harassment and attacks on the Jewish community. There's too much hate in the world and too many horrendous murderous attacks all over the world. And it's too much here in the city of New York, our great city, which is the mosaic and should be kept that way. The police department, as the speaker said, reports of an 82% uptick in the first 4 months. But, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't have to wait to see the report. We felt it here in Williamsburg, Crown Heights, and Borough Park, and Queens, and wherever a Jewish community exists. This can no longer go on. Within a week after Pittsburgh, which it was the most horrible, the first in the nation's history of so many people killed and injured at a religious institution. Immediately after that, we had fires in half a dozen synagogues. We had smashing of windows. We have punching kids, young innocent kids. You have only one crime of being identified and targeted the Jews, and they were thrown to the ground and brutally attacked. We are grateful for the police department doing their job. Let me just remind people. The New York Times article on October 30th, with a very sad question, I would call it a commentary. Is it safe to be Jewish in New York? And let me tell you, and I'll quote what they write. When a Hasidic man or woman is attacked by anyone in New York City, mainstream progressive advocacy groups do not typically send out emails calling for concern and fellowship and candlelight vigils. A weekend after the articles, after the fires happened, and we also sadly have to say the verbal anti-Semitism. And the speaker, thank you for speaking out against using something, the measles outbreak, as a way and a springboard to anti-Semitism. Let me just say, here in the city, in Williamsburg, and the Jewish schools in Brooklyn, at that time when the New York Times editorial board basically came out with a smear campaign about the lack of supposedly secular education, and that putting that as the reason for measles attack, 96% plus were vaccinated in our school. And this did not stop the New York Times and others to say equating measles with the Jews, and therefore a MTA driver was basically turned their face when a Hasidic Jew wanted to board the bus. Mr. Speaker, your presence today sends a very strong message. we thank you for coming down here and telling the city, our borough, and the world, our blood is also red. We also have rights. Progressive means everybody should be respected. Thank you for coming down, showing the respect. The final word.
Thank you.
You know, quitting smoking is hard.
It's hard.
But you did it.
It's hard.
Stopping anti-Semitism is very
hard.
hard. With your leadership, we are going to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Niederman. I also want to mention we are joined by Ellie Slavin from Congresswoman Yvette Clarke's office. I just saw, he's right over there. There he is. Great. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. And Jonathan from Attorney General Tish James's office. And next up, I want to call up a council member who's very proud to represent a large Jewish community here in Brooklyn, Councilmember Matthew Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My name is Matthew Eugene, representing District 40, that has also part of Crown High and a large concentration of Jewish community. But I just want to thank Speaker Johnson for your leadership, because under the leadership of the Speaker Johnson, we City Council members were working together and passed legislation to ensure that we stand together against anti-Semitism. And I want to take the opportunity also to thank all my colleagues and the leaders who are here. You are standing not only for the Jewish community, but you are standing for New York City. Because all of us elected officials, community leaders, and also clergy leaders, people in the community, we are working together very hard to make sure that New York City could be a place where everyone can feel free and comfortable to live in New York City and to raise their children. But what we are seeing too often, peaceful people, they're walking in the street, doing their businesses. They are being attacked for no reason. Places of worship are being attacked for no reason. But those crimes of anti-Semitism, they are destroying the core values of New York City. They are destroying the well-being of our city. And this is the reason why all of us, we should stand together, continue to stand together, because we have been doing it several times. And I'm so happy to see that we continue to do it. Because those who are committing crime, hate crime, they don't stop. They keep doing it. So we have to continue to fight together also, because we are doing it not only for the Jewish community, we are doing it for the city of New York. Let me conclude by saying that the Jewish people are being attacked, but the safety, the peace of the community is the business of all of us, is the responsibility of all of us. Jewish or non-Jew, we have to stand together to make sure that we make our city a city free of anti-Semitism, free of hate crime. And again, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to all of us. We are going to continue to do that until we have a city free of hate crime and anti-Semitism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. I want to call up my good friend Michael Miller from the Jewish Community Relations Council. Up next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. All of us know that anti-Semitism is a cancer. And as is the case with every disease, you use every approach that you believe can arrest the cancer. We are very grateful to the role that the New York Police Department plays. We're appreciative of everything that other law enforcement agencies play as well. But the role of the City Council is unique, because the City Council is the people's house. And to have the Speaker of the City Council, surrounded by several members of the City Council, come here today and to say, enough is enough, and we need to take action. We can't just sit back and allow this disease to fester. We need to make sure that we, here in the city of New York, protect every citizen of this city, every resident of this city, regardless of their faith, regardless of their garb, regardless of how they pray and how they practice. Now is the time for the voice of the people of New York to say, anti-Semitism is not welcome here. This disease is going to be conquered, and it will be conquered with the leadership of Speaker Johnson and the members of the New York City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We're joined by some more council members who are with us. You see Councilmember Alan Maisel, Councilmember Robert Cornegy, Councilmember Rafael Espinal, and next up I want to call up Councilmember Mark Levine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yasher Koach. Thank you, Speaker Johnson, for convening this gathering on such a critically important topic. Thank you, Rabbi Niederman. Where did he go? There he is, over there. For hosting us. And I do want to thank you, as we are in the midst of the worst measles outbreak to afflict this city in almost 3 decades, an outbreak in which fraudsters have been preying on the Jewish community on one side, and anti-Semites have been targeting it on the other. You've been a singularly bold voice, a powerful and impactful voice on behalf of the health of the Jewish community, rooted in the principle of pikuach nefesh, and we salute you and thank you for that. New York City has been a welcoming home to Jews for generations and has nurtured and supported a Jewish community which is amongst the largest and maybe even the largest by some measure on earth, an incredibly dynamic and vibrant Jewish community today. So it pains us to acknowledge that even here in New York City, home to such a large and storied Jewish community, that once again the ugly demon of anti-Semitism is emerging to target people through violent assaults, innocent Jews of all ages. And we need to say very clearly that it's not only violent assaults which should alarm us, that any time a swastika or Nazi propaganda defaces a synagogue or any other property in this city, that too is a hate crime.
Yes.
And that kind of hatred inevitably leads to the kinds of violent assaults which make the news. We have to confront this demon in whatever form it emerges. We have to do it together. As Rabbi Miller says, this is a cancer, and cancers metastasize. No community in the city is immune from hatred, no community of any faith or background, and we need to stand together to confront it. And we need to use every single tool at the city's disposal to do this. We need every agency and city government mobilized in this fight. The NYPD, yes, but we need our schools teaching the history of the Jewish people and the oppression that we have faced, and the history of all people, of all backgrounds, so we can promote the kind of understanding that can defeat the ignorance. And we need our health department dispatching mental health workers to the scenes of hate crimes. We need our Human Rights Commission promoting intergroup relations. We need every agency in this city mobilized, and it's why I'm very proud that the City Council, with the leadership of Speaker Johnson and my allies in the Jewish caucus, including Chair Chaim Deutsch, passed legislation to create a citywide agency to coordinate the battle against hate crimes. And we need this agency funded and staffed immediately. We cannot waste time. We need a multi-agency response to this crisis. We are not going to be deterred. We're not going to be united. We're not going to back down in the face of anti-Semitism. We are going to stand united against this ugly threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Next up is Rabbi Eli Cohen from the JCC of Crown Heights.
And thank you, as everyone has said, thank you to our speaker, Corey Johnson, for your tremendous leadership in this issue. When his staff called me and said he wanted to speak out on this subject, the words that I heard were, the speaker is mad. And you saw the passion in the way he spoke this morning about what's going on over here. But you know, in a certain way, I'm encouraged, and that is that although we've seen this tremendous rise in anti-Semitic attacks and incidents that have taken place, we're also seeing constantly, consistently, and including the leadership of the Speaker today, that the elected officials and the government agencies and the police department are always responding in a tremendous way. And that's very important, because there was a time in history when these types of things happened and people just looked the other way and pretended it didn't happen. So the fact that such a diverse group of council members and such a diverse group of leaders and such a diverse group of organizations has come together and said that we're going to combat this, it's so important. And my colleague, Jeffrey Davis, the district leader in the Crown Heights, and I have been going to public schools, talking to kids and listening to them about why they think this type of activity is going on. We're going to be doing it again a couple of times this week and next week, and we're looking forward to report on what we found out from listening to the kids. But this is something that it's beautiful to hear that this is being addressed on a citywide level, and we give our support and our thanks to everyone who's involved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Next up, Councilmember Brad Lander.
Thank you, Corey, for bringing us together here. I know that one way we're being brought together is to have African American and Caribbean and Latino leaders joining with Jewish leaders, but I also want to let you know you're doing the important act of bringing Jewish leaders together from across the spectrum of, well, we have Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Hasidic, and Haredi leaders here. And that's important at this moment. You know, anti-Semitism comes from all across the spectrum. We see it rising on the right in the form of the white nationalist murderers who committed mass murder in Pittsburgh and California. We see it rising on the left in the form of hateful political rhetoric, and we see it rising in the streets. But though it comes from across the political spectrum, its targets more often than not are those who are visibly Jewish. And so I want to speak for a minute as a proud, active, liberal, progressive Jew who knows that you guys are the ones who are on the front lines, that the attacks we've seen on the streets of Brooklyn, of course, target people who look visibly Jewish. And while we know that if they come for you in the morning, they'll come for me in the afternoon, right now we have a special responsibility of solidarity to our cousins who are most on the line. And I'm glad that we're here in Williamsburg with Rabbi Niederman standing up in that way. We've seen good action on this together. When there was anti-Semitism both at Park Slope Synagogue and Williamsburg synagogues, we joined together to make a difference. When a man put out a viral hateful video really making fun of and assaulting a young yeshivish kid, we responded together in a way that actually had a transformative impact and brought someone who was expressing anti-Semitism to see the error of his ways. It is possible, in the way that Rabbi Miller spoke, not only to focus on public safety, though surely we must do that, but to build a more inclusive city, a more inclusive society. And it's important finally to remember that while fighting and standing up to anti-Semitism is of course about protecting Jews, it is not only about protecting Jews. The cancer of anti-Semitism functions as a scapegoating, as a weapon aimed at our democracy, aimed at the way people come together across lines of difference. And so our collective responsibility to stand up for that inclusive, multiracial democracy, it starts here. It does not end here. I am so honored to be part of this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, everyone who's out here this morning.
I want to call up Evan Bernstein from, here you go, from the Anti-Defamation League. Thank you. Thank you, Evan, for being with us. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Johnson, for convening us. Thank you, Rabbi, for hosting us. I want to thank the NYPD for all their diligence on just the sheer amount of hate crimes, specifically towards the Jewish community and other minority groups in this city. We have seen a normalization of anti-Semitism over the last few years. The numbers are bearing that out, and we're incredibly concerned. 1,879 anti-Semitic incidents in this country last year, an average of 5 a day, a 55% increase in anti-Semitic assaults here in New York last year alone. We saw a dramatic uptick in the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the fourth quarter last year, and now the NYPD has confirmed that that trend is continuing. The fact that we have leadership in Speaker Johnson, other city council members that are here, the NYPD, other law enforcement, is critical. But we cannot take that for granted. It is very easy to become numb. We've seen numbness around anti-Semitic vandalism. We've seen numbness around anti-Semitic harassment. And we're starting to now see numbness towards anti-Semitic assaults. I hear now language, another press conference about an assault, another reward about an assault. We need to keep our voice going continuously. We cannot let them win. The only way we can do that is convene like this and call this out every single time it happens. We cannot become numb to this kind of hate. And as anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine for other kinds of hate that are taking place in this city, it's important to know that other minority groups are feeling this. But for sure, the images of seeing Orthodox Jews being assaulted on Shabbat, being assaulted on the street, the fear is there, and we need to stand with our brothers and sisters of all faiths, all denominations of Judaism at this time. And again, we thank you for all of your leadership on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I want to call up Councilmember Robert Cornegy.
Thank you, Speaker Johnson. It was mentioned earlier, collective responsibility, and I'm here for collective responsibility. As a member of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, I want to let my Jewish colleagues and my Jewish friends know that we stand together in solidarity. So while there's an uptick in hate crimes in general, it seems to be specifically targeted around the Jewish community. And for historical context, what we know is that when this can only escalate. It doesn't de-escalate unless we de-escalate it. Other than that, it can escalate. So as someone who's had the pleasure of living abroad, and particularly in Israel, I've seen different brands of anti-Semitism. None quite as vicious as what we're beginning to see here in the United States, and in particular in Brooklyn. And I, for one, as a member of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, and as a neighboring district that I represent in Bedford-Stuyvesant, say that we have to stop this immediately. So I'm proud to be a part of the leadership under Speaker Johnson that would put forward policy and legislation to combat it, because we cannot police our way out of anti-Semitism. It takes a collective responsibility, and I'm here for that collective responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Next up, a good friend to all of us, great guy, great New Yorker, someone who's served our city for a long time, not just through the Board of Rabbis, but also through his service to the FDNY, my good friend, Rabbi Joe Potasnik.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker Johnson, for always having that leading voice on issues that matter. Thank you, Rabbi Niederman, for bringing this all together, and thank you for arranging for such easy parking here in Williamsburg. A woman going to a synagogue on Sabbath now asks, is it safe to pray here? Not only in Paris, but here in New York City. A young man wearing a yarmulke walking in the streets wants to know, will I be subjected to an attack? Not only in Paris, but here in New York City. Captain Hollywood and I were speaking before about young kids who were in the playground before. And we said they're not born with hate, they learn it. So I would suggest we talk about the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. Let's add one more R, respect. We got to teach our young people respect, not only for Jews, but as was said before by Councilman Lander, respect for all people, because the one who starts with me doesn't stop with me, then continues with you. We will soon be commemorating Memorial Day. Those soldiers did not give their lives so that we would live in fear, so that we would be afraid to practice our faith. So we have a responsibility to fulfill their mission of living in a true free society. When you go to the 9/11 Memorial, you'll find many flags there. One is the flag of the state of New York, has the well-known Latin words, E pluribus unum, out of many one. And I would say, as we come here today, and we've been together for so many conferences, we are many, but when it comes to standing against hatred, we are one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming here today, and I think you see from council members coming from all over the city, from all of the community leaders that are here today, we stand united in saying that anti-Semitism is evil, is unacceptable, and is not something that we're going to stand idly by and watch happen, whether it be assaults or slurs, or as Councilmember Levine said, imagery or swastikas. Every time it happens, we are going to speak out about it, and I want to thank you, Rabbi. We are joined today by Andrew Gross, who's from the Council General of Israel. Where is he? I want to thank him for being here today. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. People have places to go, so I'm happy to stay around and take questions, but I'm not going to keep everyone here. So I'm happy to stay and talk to the press, but I wanted to thank everyone for being here today, and thank you all for standing united together against anti-Semitism and hate. Thank you very much. I know. Thank you very much.
Well, we have been watching City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, joined by Jewish and community leaders in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, addressing the alarming rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York City. Johnson says in the first 4 months of 2019, there has been an 82% rise in hate crimes. 348 anti-Semitic crimes were reported in 2018. Johnson calls this a crisis and asks everyone to do their part to put an end to hate by educating each other about other faiths.